So it's the last call for trade deals. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent expects to complete tariff negotiations by October with any of the countries who haven't already reached an agreement with the United States. Major partners like Canada, Mexico, Brazil, India, they're still scrambling to lower tariffs and secure a better deal with America. But we could have told them if they had come sooner, maybe they would have gotten better terms. Of course, there's China hanging out there, too. The president staring down a decision to extend the trade truce with Beijing. That expires tomorrow. But the White House says that Americans should be happy with where the U.S. is on trade.
We're seeing a manufacturing boom in this country because you have a president who's telling people that if you want to sell to great American consumers, you've got to make it in America and use great American workers to do it. The second thing the tariffs are doing is it's bringing in a lot of additional revenue, which of course we're using to give tax relief to the American people and make it easier for average Americans to get by.
All right, so there are different ways of looking at the tariffs. We're going to look for that CPI number. I'm going to be a little geeky here, Kennedy, tomorrow to see if inflation is starting to come through, as Jerome Powell says it will, as a direct result of tariffs. So far, we haven't seen too much of an indication that it's really hurting the American consumer. But these deals are still hanging out in the balance. Bessent is saying, don't worry, we'll have it all done by October. The market seems pretty confident, at least until it's not, that that is the case.
I know, but isn't everything just weird? Like, nothing makes sense. You'll have one indicator, one index that, you know, whichever side will glom onto, and they'll go, see, the world is ending, the economy is shrinking, workers are suffering, and then you have either a dubious jobs report or, you know, sky-high markets, and then everyone else goes, no, it is all working. This is going according to his master plan. Of course, the big worry is always that companies that are the ones who are feeling the pain from the tariffs, they're going to pass it on to consumers. And of course, that would set off an inflationary chain reaction. And that's the one thing that has people worried, from, you know, Midwestern Trump voters who want to see manufacturing coming back to this country. And then you had Elise Slotnick, the senator from Michigan, who said, no, actually, Zoran Mamdani touched on the exact same thing that the Trump voter was feeling, and prices are too damn high. So if we are entering into an inflationary period, I worry that that's going to result in a socialist mayor in the city where I live, where taxes are already too damn high.
Yeah, I hear you on that. And it would definitely be a big problem. But that is it. It's the affordability crisis that they're grabbing onto. Trump's way of, you know, trying to rejigger the economy is to get growth to fix the problem, whereas Mamdani is basically saying we're going to tax the rich and give everything away, Brian. You know, and Dagan brought up the expectations for the CPI number, that they might be higher. But I would go back to Kennedy's point, which is that you can argue whatever set of numbers you give me, I can argue it from either side about what happened.
Well, and you got numbers that aren't even reliable. I mean, that's the other piece. We got the jobs number this month. Who knows if that's where the jobs number ends up? We don't know from month to month. It takes 2 or 3 months to figure that out. The tariffs haven't been a disaster, okay? That's clear. They were supposed to be a disaster by now. They haven't. The CPI read this week, if it's hot, it might be a little bit of a tariff effect in there.
Yeah.
But that's not the same thing as hotter inflation. Inflation is a monetary phenomenon. That's the Federal Reserve land there. So I think that's being used as a red herring, because Democrats desperately got to find something wrong with the Trump economy before the tax cuts, before the business tax cuts kick in. Because I think when those kick in, it's going to be a problem for Democrats. And they're hoping they can get ahead of that. Because here's where I agree with them on one thing, and actually Mamdani on this, because he's talking about affordability. If people feel like prices are not getting better, if they feel like their wages aren't keeping up with prices, they're going to be super ticked off. And it is a mistake for any administration to lose sight of that. Biden lost sight of that. He thought he could transitory it away. It didn't work. I don't think that the president now is going to lose sight of that. But if you mess around too much and people feel like they're not getting relief, they're not as ideological as the people punditing about it on TV. They're going to vote for somebody who they think is going to make it better. That's what Republicans are going to have to contend with in 2026.
Dagan?
I'm going to toss a ball in the air for the great libertarian, Kennedy, because I'm curious what you think about, and Ed Lawrence asked the president about it earlier today.
Fast Eddie. Fast Eddie.
Yes.
That's right.
You know.
Nvidia, our the most pricey, in the world company. And AMD are paying now the U.S. government 15% of its cut of sales of a lower end. It's the lower end H2O chip for Nvidia, and AMD lower end chip, AI chip sales to China. And this was clearly a deal that Jensen Huang negotiated with President Trump.
But did he take him a glass sculpture like Tim Cook did?
Right. I saw that.
Yeah. What did he bring him?
Tim Cook looked very nervous, which I enjoyed. So the exports, these exports of both these chips were stopped in April, and now they're back on again with this revenue sharing deal in place. And doing some research on this, it's unconstitutional under Article 1, Section 9. It forbids the federal government from laying export taxes on. So this appears to be sort of like what happened during World War I and World War II, where you would have export control regimes in place because it was wartime, but you would have a licensing fee that you would have to pay in order to export goods overseas. And as much as President Trump loves collecting revenue for the American people, once President Trump leaves office, there is so much room for abuse of this.
That's what I was thinking about, because these companies are going to make what are essentially short-term deals in order to comply with the philosophy of this administration. But President Trump is only going to be President Trump for 3 more years. And then you're going to have, either many MAGA Republicans are hoping a continuation of the Trumpian doctrine, especially on foreign policy and economic policy. But if you have a Democrat come in, they're going to undo all of these deals. And, you're going to see the pendulum swing in the totally opposite way. And the argument will be, we need more government fuss budgetry. But, you could make the argument that this administration is picking winners and losers. Now, AMD and Nvidia are looking at this going, well, we don't really care. We're doing the math here, and we'll make more money paying this 15%, whatever you want to call it, the sexy chip fee, because we can't call it an export tax, because we'll make so much more money on the other end. We want access to China. And so, they created these sort of lower tier chips so China couldn't use a monstrous number of them in order to advance their military AI capabilities. So what they're saying is, this is basically a flip phone versus an iPhone 16 Pro.
You could have a President Newsom put a gross oil
don't even say
tax
those
of
two words
15%.
together.
And he would get the oil from his hair.
Yeah, that's right. He'd have to tax himself in that case. But you could do this. I mean, I think that's the argument: is what happens after this administration.
That's a fair point,
kind of 15%?
except that Newsom tracks at 32% in his own estate. So there's not a President Newsom.
You pick your name.
Well,
all right.
The two stocks in question, AMD and Nvidia, are both up. They've been up. They've had a wild run.
I own Nvidia. I bought more last week. I will continue to own it. My new target on Nvidia is $240. I think it will get there in short order.
I made a joke on the phone with somebody earlier who works in tech. They were like, yeah, Nvidia stock's up because they have access to a market that they didn't have access to just a few weeks ago. I was like, Jensen Huang could come out with a new leather jacket on and the stock would be up 10%. I mean, it's just absurd, the mania around that stock. But go ahead.
So 12% of their revenues are linked to these chips that they were able to sell to China, then not able to sell to China, and now they're able to sell again. And in order to be able to sell again, right, they're going to charge the Chinese another 15%. Nvidia isn't paying that. The Chinese are paying that. So there's no impact to earnings. In fact, the reason that Nvidia is up and making new highs again on the heels of this information is now we know that they can continue to sell the chips. And we know the Chinese want to continue to buy the chips. So I'm totally fine with Nvidia. I know there may be some technicalities, as you point out, Dagan, about how do you classify this. They'll figure it out. They've got smart people to figure out the line item.
No, I'm talking about government. I'm not talking about Nvidia. Nvidia, as a private company, can do whatever it wants to do. I'm talking about with the government meddling in business revenue, that another leader will take this and abuse it.
It's possible.
Mark my words.
It's possible if another leader has the guts that President Trump has to enact as many executive orders as he has. Biden didn't. Remember, Biden kept saying, oh, my hands are tied on the border. I can't do anything. Well, now we found out that there were 92 executive orders by the Trump administration on the first day that sealed the border. So President Trump has the guts to actually put forth the executive orders that enable him to do this. You're right. There may be someone else who comes in on the Democratic side somewhere down the road who has the gumption, the guts, the vision, the ability to execute that President Trump has. But I haven't seen that in any...
Biden did all that stuff on climate, though. They'll do it again on climate stuff. They're not going to do it on the border, but they'll do it.
Wait, I'm talking... Wait, you
I have a phone. I have a pen. Like, I don't need Congress. And it's like giant sweatshirts. The trend is going to continue with the next administration, whether it's Republican or Democrat. They are just going to do it to enact their agenda because Trump showed that you could supersize it and put all of this on steroids in order to get your laundry list through.
And Dagan, to your point, in the previous block, we were talking about Intel and saying we don't want to see taxpayer funds from the CHIPS Act, for example, being funneled through to Intel. They are not capable of, using those funds properly, but also taxpayers just shouldn't be involved. I don't do double standards, so I'm not going to say it's okay for the Nvidia case because, Trump's handling it and it's going to work out for us. It's going to work out for us for the next 3.5 years. But I agree with you down the line. To your point, get the government out of it.
Well, you brought up the border. The border was closed when President Trump left office, and it was Biden that ripped up everything Trump did. So all President Trump did when he came back in office was restore the order that was in place when he left during his first term. But you pivot to the border. Yeah, the border's closed. That's amazing. But this is different. This is something where another executive, because the power of the executive branch has been expanded so handily, another executive as president will come in and demand kickbacks from every imaginable company in order to do business overseas. Mark my words, it's a dangerous path.
Okay, we got to words are marked. We've got to take a look at Bitcoin climbing today towards a record high following President Trump's executive order allowing crypto investments in 401k retirement plans. So take a look there, 120,000 for, why are you doing that happy
Somebody's
dance?
dancing to your laugh.
You got to show the dance.
Somebody's reallocating their portfolio as we speak.
All right. Coming up, the summit is set. We've got brand new details on President Trump's high-stakes meeting with Russia's Vladimir Putin after this.